All righty, welcome in everybody. This is a new year. It is 2025. I know you all already know that, but for the purposes of this, welcome to HR Answers HR Lunch Bunch. I'm glad that you're here. It is January, and our topic today is employee learning and development, kind of the top priorities or things that are being said out there via articles and blog posts and things like that. I've got some stats for you. I've got some info share, but I also want to make sure we hear from you. If this is your first time, we meet the first Wednesday of every month, unless it falls like on a holiday, because kind of thinking you might have some other plans. If I've not met you before, my name is Deborah Jeffries. I serve as the vice president of our company. Been here for over 30 years, been there, done that, and then some. This is kind of a pet project of sorts that I inherited over the years. We've been doing this for over 20 years. We usually have done it in person with a brown bag lunch. But when the pandemic came along, we said, hey, we can do this continuously. And then we had people started to join us all over the state and even out of state. So we've kept it virtual, no travel plans. And now people either eat lunch or don't. I don't know. I think we've just kind of squeezed it into our schedule of sorts. So, but my goal really is to have you feel free to use the chat box to chime in, to be able to network with each other. If you don't feel like unmuting yourself, but this really is intended to be a conversation. This whole thing was there's lots of ways for HR people to get information and go off to a lunch meeting or other kind of conferences or activities to learn. But sometimes those are so structured that we don't always get to talk with each other. We sit at a round table or a long table and we're there and there's a speaker and they're sharing info. But this really is intended to be kind of a discussion where what are you doing in your organization? Or what have you been thinking about doing? And someone else is doing it or someone did it and, well, they had a few pitfalls and we can learn from them. So truly use the chat box. Feel free to unmute. Let's talk, as well as being able to network and meet some people maybe you haven't. Because I looked at the list of quote 20 RSVPs and there were several names I didn't recognize. So that's always good to be able to meet new people. So with that said, employee learning and development, top priorities. I want to share a few pieces of info and then let's get to some key questions. So, some recent stats that I just read. I think I got one from a magazine, one from a blog post, and you can tell me whether or not you're finding this as kind of any learning disconnects in your world. That when it comes to like Gen Z and millennials, 50% of our young learners choose online content over traditional learning in a classroom. 40% of Gen Z learners rank mentorship as kind of a preferred style of learning and development and connecting with growth opportunities inside the organization versus our boomers. Now, you may or may not always know the exact age of your employees, but boomers do prefer the traditional classroom over any of our digital offerings. And boomers seek to learn from industry specific websites for upskilling their abilities and their knowledge base. Is this resonating with any of you? Or are you finding it different? What's happening inside your workplaces? Or are you asking your folks, or are you doing some kind of survey amongst your individuals? This is that part where you guys get to talk or use the chat. Otherwise, I promise we can all stare at each other. And you guys are looking good today. Um, Okay, so I find that everyone says they prefer online learning because they don't like coming into the office, right? Or coming into any place, my words, because that reflects their preferences. Yeah. And it's easier depending on where people are living or how long it takes to drive places, especially if it's coming into a quote unquote a classroom someplace else. Even if you guys aren't offering the training, you're sending them off for training. They have to drive into someplace or pay for parking kinds of things. So we do a lot of virtual learning. Um, they would, and then at the end, they would prefer more in-person learning. There is what kind of the evaluation is saying. Okay. I think that people do appreciate when they're in person, they seem to get more out of it. I think so too. So I think there's an element here of one, how do people learn best? And truly, are you asking that question? And actually, are you asking that question at the beginning of their employment? When they're a new employee, when they come on board, ask them, maybe even in the interview process, ask them, do you know, have you thought about how do you learn best? How have you found whether classroom, in person, online, um, visual, auditory? Um, what have you found is your best learning method? How do you pick up information in the best format? Ask them because part of that then, how is that lining up with your onboarding activities? How is that going to be putting them inside a department with their manager or training individual in some fashion or another? But that might also give us a better idea of do we need to be doing something different or offering micro learning opportunities? If you've got people who are out in the field, they're not coming into the classroom, quote unquote. Online learning, sitting down for extended period of time isn't really going to be your best option. Let's see, what else do we have? New to the role and should probably survey. Just finding out there's so many options, but also let's talk about being realistic with amount of time. So it is an investment in your people. If we want to retain people, one of the things that you'll see in another set of info is CEOs are saying that this is an important aspect. Retaining our people. Well, instead of here's what we do around learning or education or providing opportunities for growth inside the organization after they get hired, let's make sure people know about that all on the front side. Part of your pitch to applying for the job, let alone in the interview. Because if a lot of people and our younger generations are saying, I want to learn, I want to learn, I want to learn, let's let them know you can grow within our organization. Now, if you're a flat organization, then let's also be realistic. At HR Answers, we only got under a dozen people. It's pretty flat. You can learn lots, but you're not going to be learning for upward mobility. It's going to be more lateral kind of knowledge and information use. So let's also be realistic in regards to this, right? So then finding out what our people want, but then what kind of methods are you using to provide training right now? What what have you used and rolled out? Are you budgeting for anything new for 2025, or exploring options, partnering with people? What say you? And that can be any channels of delivery. Sorry for those of you who are only in listen mode at a later date and time of this program. The answer was in chat, death by PowerPoint. So I can appreciate that. I'm I often, when working with clients and doing on-site training with folks, as I always tell them, I'd rather give you more rather than less. And this set of materials that I created for today is by no means an exception because you can always then go back and look. And that is always my philosophy. I'd rather give you more rather than less and have it be a resource for you than I know that there's impact in pictures. But if you go back and look at, and I will do this when I go to a conference, go back and look at the PowerPoint that a speaker has given us, and it's pictures, which tells me nothing about what they covered in the delivery. So when I go back and review, it doesn't help me with takeaways, concrete takeaways. And so some people need to be able to digest stuff over time and have it resonate with them. That's not going to resonate. That's not going to stick. So also when we think about your delivery methods, there's also how do we make things sticky? And one of the ways to make it sticky is you have to keep saying it, and sometimes in multiple different ways, because then that helps us get at the different learning styles for people. So people chimed in and said one-on-ones in person via Teams, weekly office hours for certain topics, also virtual and recorded trainings. You also get the maximum when you do a training and record it. You don't have to quote keep doing it over and over again because you've capitalized on that one time first. Just have to make sure that it's not outdated, right, in terms of your training, whether it's onboarding or your harassment or something along those lines. Someone says, so far I've rolled out one video training for them to complete on their own time. I want to do a combination of live and in person with video and or handouts. Um, I also subscribe to how-to guides. Yes, nice. Um, like it, like it. Okay, good. Now, this next slide might be feeling maybe a little overwhelming of all the training methods, and hopefully I made that big enough for you to be able to see. Um, because when we're in a classroom, we can do more kinds of hands-on exercises face to face with people. I had, in fact, tomorrow I'm headed up to Hood River to work with a client, and we're talking about challenging, quote unquote, difficult conversations. And one of the questions was, can we have people join us online? Well, the easy answer is sure, they can. We also wanted it to be exercise driven. So we're going to have difficult conversations and practice them, but we're going to have people online. Okay, we're going to try and get the maximum benefit out of the programming. So let's make it hard for people to kind of see each other and hear each other and interact with each other, having difficult conversations. Well, and I have a bias, and you should always know where your biases are. The answer is if you're going to have a challenging conversation, you probably should have it in person. Talk about meaningful, purposeful. What's the why behind it? So having a bunch of people be able to kind of opt out of the difficulty, not lean in to the challenging conversations if you're a manager or supervisor, because you get to do it online. Now I understand. I'm in another state. I can't be face to face. There are some exceptions, and I do get that. But then we definitely have to be online. This is not an email conversation. This is not a phone call conversation, right? So being able to think about what are you trying to accomplish, right? So topic, what's the delivery, but what are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal? So instructor led versus e-learning on their own, hands-on, coaching, mentoring, that's different than just being in a classroom. There's social learning by groups, even peer learning from each other. We've got your video training, you got your strict like lecture versus presentation where it's just information going out one way. You can job shadow, right? Simulations, case studies, exercises, but simulations put them right in it. If you draw out real detailed case studies or scenarios for people to follow, be that ever present loving that you all love to do, role playing, right? Job rotations, um, group discussions, blended learning. Are we doing that? Are we thinking about that? So these are all different kinds of methods that we can have, let alone then what are we doing within the content to kind of make it sticky? And I didn't even really go there with information in terms of ways to make it sticky, but I certainly can add that as an add-on item to the material we send out afterwards, because I've actually even done a program on different ways to make sure that we're making the content sticky. So, how do these resonate with you in terms of different delivery methods, as it were? And I think you can do any of these with your compliance or with your soft skills, which I don't think are soft anymore. Just again, a bias. I think they're business essential skills to make sure that people are, quote, successful in their jobs, any level of a job. Are you doing some of these and you just didn't think about it? Okay, so great question. How do we select the ideal method of delivery? So one of them is going to be based on like amount of time. Two might also be who is your audience, right? And three, well, probably 2A, when you think about who's your audience, keep in mind now, this is, again, I told you I have biases and I pretty much know where they are. I'm a person when I'm doing instruction with a there's a difference because I'll work with just offer a class and anybody can come. I can also go on site and have people that it's just a client with their employee base. If we're talking about developing people, like if I work a tremendous amount with supervisors, my goal is to nudge, is to push a little. So I actually am going to push people a little outside their comfort zone. So if if I'm in person, chances are good I might ask them to stand up and share their ideas that they came out of a work group, a small team of 5 people. They were working on something. Somebody needs to come up and debrief. So they're going to stand up and verbalize that to the whole group. Well, a lot of people don't like to speak in public. I'm giving little opportunities for them to develop that skill because then as a supervisor, they probably are needing to do some of that leading a meeting or whatnot. So when we think about what's the ideal delivery, we also have think about again, what's your topic? What are you trying to accomplish? And then here's like 10 minutes of info, and then here's an exercise or activity that goes along with that. So it's practical, it's practice, it's implementing, it's giving them a chance to talk with each other. It's making it real to them. So if you do case studies, that the case studies or the scenarios or the examples are your workplace, not a bank that doesn't have anything to do with you. If it's people asking for time off, but that's really not issues or challenges you're having, but you're having it in communication breakdowns, then use that as the exercise. So being able to think about what really makes sense because the ideal delivery, if you've got people who are out in the field, there's crews working out, then maybe something that they can access on their phone and it's a 5 minute kind of micro learning that's sharing information with them that then gives like a question at the end that you'd like them to ask, to answer. You ask, they answer, and it kind of gets submitted so that one, you know that they saw it. Um, if you've got employees with supervisors and the supervisors are doing a follow up on the training that they're required to do or that they asked to go and do, what did you learn? What's your takeaway? What are you going to implement from the programming? Is there accountability to the programming? So, thinking about again, what's the topic? What are you trying to accomplish? Who's your audience? And if you're working with somebody from the outside, they might have suggestions. If you've got multiple people on your team, what have they done in the past? If you've got a network of people, if this is not your thing in terms of delivering training, but you would like to do more of it, then hook up with other people who do it. If you really like, I'm not into it, it's not my thing, then you might have some peers. Maybe you have an expert on staff. And so think about that. But just talking straight to people and hoping they're going to get it isn't it. I actually had somebody this week say, "Don't you have some like program or a handout or a book that I can give to somebody and that will make them better? That will help them?" No. Do I have handouts? Do I have a book recommendation? Do I have programming material? Yes. Do you just give it to them and hope that it's going to be better? They're not going to improve. You actually need to spend time talking to them. And that goes off into personalization. And I'll pause there so that I don't get too hard ahead of myself because I see things in the chat box and then I have questions for you. And I want to make sure you guys get to talk more. Let's see. Um, I do actually do more of these than I was thinking about. We have more of these methods. We do have new hire shadows and observe. Wonderful. We also have subject matter experts, top notch, that we encourage people to reach out to when they have certain questions. You could even take those subject matter experts and maybe do like brown bag lunches or something like that, a 15-minute something where we're making sure everybody has the same education because sometimes that happens where some people get information, others don't. We kind of wonder how come everybody's not on the same page. How can we make sure everybody's getting that information or benefiting from that information? So thanks for sharing that, Maddie. I appreciate it. So, do you have some key questions that I'm thinking about is like around leadership development, growth and retention, combating the fact that we're trying to do so much, um, pure learning or mentoring. So, what are your strategies for nurturing and growing your employees? Do you have some I think organizations aspire to build a culture of learning in some fashion, right? Whether it's like employee belonging, boosting growth, increase retention, but we kind of sometimes struggle with like, how are we doing some of these things? Do you have some strategies or thoughts about growing employees or creating more effective leaders, supervisors, managers? You put in the word that you want. Are there things that you've got some strategies or some goals or thoughts this coming year and into the future? Do you guys do most of the training yourself? Do you send them out? Do you bring people in? Again, you can unmute and just chat with us.
Okay, I'll take a shot at the first one.
Okay, good.
For nurturing growth and for our employees and making effective leaders, we host a monthly leadership meeting where for the last 12 months, we've been watching DEI seminars so that our leadership is more DEI proficient, more familiar with the concepts. And since that DEI course is coming to a close, we put out a survey for our leadership to answer like, where should we take this monthly growth and development training meeting next? Like what input do they, what will aid in their development? Or should we continue to focus on DEI? So that's something we're doing.
I love it. And have you gotten some good feedback? Are you seeing some trends?
Um, it's kind of all over the board. More people want more effective DEI training. Other people want more practical training on methodologies, policies, procedures that kind of affect our day to day. So I have to figure out the best way to take it in the direction that will best benefit our leadership.
Gotcha. Okay, good. And about how many people, Michelle, are you working with or talking about?
Well, our organization is over 120, so we have about, and so with an animal shelter, the Humane Society for Southwest Washington, and since we have so many departments and so many facets of our organization, we have a leadership team that's about 30 to 35 people strong.
Okay, that's a fair number.
Yeah.
A lot of needs to meet.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. and something in the chat box. We're hoping to start using accountability workbooks. Oh, to accomplish goals. We want them to be documentation, a conversation starter, an opportunity for employees to recognize their growth areas and identify training needs. Okay, so everybody is, so am I understanding that every employee would have like an accountability workbook? And is the workbook just, quote unquote, I say just, a notebook for notes, or are there prompts? Are there statements? There are things for them to fill out?
So we're an insurance agency. We went to a conference, and one of the things that we learned about was another agency that has a working Excel document where each employee is, and everyone can see it. Everyone's assigned a color, and the only person that knows who has each color is that employee and then their manager. And then it has just a bunch of data, how much time they're spending on the phone, how many activities they're doing in a day within our agency management system. Just a bunch of different reports run, so it's actual numbers and data versus opinions, so that they can see, oh, I'm spending a lot more time on the phone than my peers are, or I'm doing X amount more activities than they are. I wonder if I could be more efficient in doing something, because every single time they do something, it creates an activity in our system, whether they see that it's making it or not. So we would be able to say, okay, maybe I need to be more efficient, and cut down on each of those different things. And the idea is that they can see, okay, this is how I'm doing in comparison to my peers. These are my goals from this. This is a conversation starter for management to say, hey, I see that this is going on. How can we fix this area? Or you're doing really well here. Great job. Can you help your peers with this? That kind of thing. But also me as a trainer, I can say, okay, I see that they're not being efficient in this area, and this is how I can help them individually. Or I see that company-wide, we need help in this department. Let me make a training for that opportunity.
Absolutely. Depending on the individual, maybe a little competitiveness.
Yep.
Also, I'm sure that then the things that you are tracking are then the metrics that are important to the organization, and keeping that kind of in alignment, as opposed to just tracking for tracking. It's the things that matter. And in some respects, numbers, and I don't mean numbers of the individual things, it's a bit of a numbers game in your industry in terms of being able to convert business or follow up with clients, retention of the clients, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Okay. That that makes more sense in terms of, I was like, workbooks, accountability. Not heard that before. Okay, I like it. Nice. Anybody else in terms of leadership development and strategies? Is there anything specific that you're doing in terms of career development opportunities to attract and or quote retain your top talent? Because this can be one that can be used on either end of that equation. And again, who are what kind of individuals are you trying to attract? What's coming your direction in terms of individuals applying for your jobs? How easy is it to find talent in the first place? What is it that they're looking for? What's going on in your industry? And maybe in some respects, are you shopping your competition and finding out what they're offering or how they're offering? Are we competitive, not just for the dollars or the benefits, but the other kinds of things that you bring to the table? Because sure, maybe I can earn a little bit more money someplace else, well, what's also with the culture? And then if education is a big deal, or the personalization of benefits, the personalization of education and growth. And again, growth doesn't mean upward mobility. It's the knowledge, right? To be better in my area of expertise or something along those lines. Is any of your programming or education, whether it's you doing it or bringing someone in from the outside, maybe utilizing your employee assistance program or plan for employee burnout or stress management or organization or things like that to addressing challenges of workload or expectations or fatigue. And fatigue can be, I put the words on here on the slide, change fatigue, because sometimes we work for organizations where maybe the owner, the CEO, the entrepreneurial spirit of someone, the latest and greatest, something. We're always changing directions. Or just because our industry is in constant flux, or because of the economy, or legislative activities, or whatever, we've got a lot of change. And that can be pretty draining on people, or we're trying to keep up because of the growth that we're having. You guys doing anything in that space or making that an initiative?
For the Humane Society, we definitely have an employee assistance program that we um, deliver training on and make sure all new staff and current staff are oriented with. However, given the nature of our work, it's definitely something that we recognize that we need to improve and grow on and really ensure that staff feel supported in that regard. So yes, but I feel like we have a long ways to go.
I could imagine in your body of work, and this would be true for any of you who are HR professionals, just that profession, that role as a whole. Any of you who are hanging out in the benefits realm and aiding employees in this regards, um, veterinary individuals, um, compassion fatigue in this element of taking on the emotions, taking on other people's challenges, healthcare folks, just in general, the when we can connect so much, too much to what's going on for others. Um, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. And if we can't build some appropriate professional kind of boundaries around things, we can take on a lot of the compassion fatigue. And how do we deal with that in our body of work? And whether they are furry people, as it were, or whether or not they're humans, the answer is those connections can be very strong. And when we go home at the end of the day, um, we don't always want or need to be taking some of that stress home with us. And it can have an impact on the people we live with too, right? Um, Weighing in the chat box, we just recently went through an EMR transition and hosted 3 leadership development sessions on change management, right? And change can be, some people embrace change and some people are fearful of that and the fear of the unknown, and we that is very draining, and it's almost like they're multitasking because they're showing up and doing their work, but their brain also is working back here, thinking about how's this going to impact me, what's going to happen next, is everything going to be okay? And so their brain is multitasking, which sometimes mean it isn't as focused on the body of work that they need to be doing. And if we're in an environment that is um, anything that might be more labor intensive, that also can mean, am I going to be as safe as I need to be on the job? If I'm multitasking, am I mentally distracted on all the other stuff that's going on? So being able to think about this also from a safety standpoint for any of your folks, or passing that along to our safety managers or who's ever managing that piece of the equation as well. What about peer learning, mentoring? Do you guys have anybody have formal mentoring programs, or maybe even informal employee development that includes more of the social learning, small groups together, working on problem solving together in some fashion? that might even be an opportunity in terms of if we if employees are coming to us with challenges or concerns or something that they see that could be room for improvement, do we agree? And do we say you have time to work on that with others? Why don't you and so and so? I mean, talk about taking someone who's an area of expertise, an expert in a particular area. What about you working with somebody? That also is an opportunity for knowledge transfer of our most senior people. Do we that brings up the whole, how is the graying of your work staff? Do we have people? I still have one client up in Washington whose average age several years ago was 55. And they kept talking about succession planning, succession planning, succession planning. And I said, you're still talking about it. What are you doing about it? There's a big difference between talking and doing. And the answer is you've got to start passing some of this information and expertise. You've got to train some of these people. If one of these key players leaves, there goes the knowledge and there goes the history. And some of this was their equipment. You got to make sure because otherwise you're a specialty organization and not everybody knows how to work it, let alone repair it. That's kind of a thing. So let's make sure. And they aren't teaching it in high school, junior colleges. That's a specialty kind of thing. Let's make sure you're not going to find yourself short in some fashion or another. So I like this. Our assistants typically work with experienced account managers and then take their learning to promote at some point. The senior AMs, account managers, tend to become mentors. And so the key would be there in that tend to become, then is that intentional? Do they know that that's a thing? Do they know what they're supposed to cover in being a mentor? Do they understand kind of the role modeling that kind of goes with that? Is there certain things that we want to make sure they cover when they're a mentor? Um, and making sure that we understand how are we defining mentor? Because and again, a bias of mine, I don't believe someone's direct supervisor should ever be someone's mentor. And the reason I say that is because I want to make sure that my supervisor gets to coach me, gets to direct me, gives me feedback on room for improvement. A mentor has kind of been there and done that and can ask me a bunch of questions and can ask me, have I thought about and how are you doing on something and have you thought about and would you consider and how is that in alignment with your goals and that sort of thing. And no it's not that there can't be quote unquote coaching, but it's not necessarily directed immediately to my job. It can be growth in the job, growth out of the job, but there's no feedback that's room for improvement. I want to say the word punishment, and that's not really what I mean. That's not that role of that person. That's the supervisor. And if the supervisor is also serving as a mentor, can they take on and off the hats and keep them separate with them never coming together, right? So the mentor is there to like answer questions and probe around questions and offer questions to the mentee on a real regular basis and kind of push them to think maybe outside the box. Where a supervisor, I think, can ask a lot of questions and should coach and have the employee come to realization on their own and kind of see the light if they're doing their job really well, but they also have a lot of other roles and responsibilities. So making sure that we're thoughtful about what, if they become mentors, are we giving them some guidance on what does it mean to be truly a mentor? And some of you, I'm guessing, you've even had someone come up to you. Cindy, you and I know each other, and I'm guessing, someone has said to you a time or two or more, Oh, you've been a mentor of mine. I've followed you. You've given me some great advice. And you're like, had I known I was being a mentor, I might have actually said or did something more intentionally. You don't
Or
know
not
that,
said something.
right? I didn't know that I was doing that for you, right? And it's a high compliment. However, it wasn't purposeful, right? It wasn't intentional in that respects. So so these are just kind of some key questions to be running around in your brain for you and others to kind of talk about. So here's some things that I also kind of put together for you. There's always been this, I say always, there's been kind of this thought to adult learning about, 70% challenging assignments and work experiences, 20% on developing relationships, and 10% on coursework and training. It's called the 7-20-10 rule. I should reiterate that, make sure I'm being clear. 70, 20, 10. And the answer is I'm not sure that that's the right mix anymore. I'm not sure that that's actually accurate in terms of how people and all the options available to learning. I think that's kind of an outdated model of sorts, at least from what I read, what I experience, what I believe my clients and in the work world for reality. I think those elements are still in play. I just don't know that those percentages are accurate. And when we think about how are we delivering programs, um, this this information, I'm trying to remember. I think I made a note to myself. Came from Biz Library. This came from Library, and it just came out at the beginning of. I just got it a week ago or so. Um, 65% blended learning approach, mix of in-person and virtual options. One to keep it a little bit more uh, alive, interactive, change it up on people so it's not so routine. 16%, almost 17% online or off-the-shelf content. Only 8% virtual and 8% in person in terms of when asking people how are they doing their delivering programs in 2025. This is what people are saying that they're doing. So that blended learning is really where it's at in terms of all the options that are kind of out there. And micro learning was the number one trend of 2024. I will tell you that personalized learning or role specific, ROLE, role specific learning, I believe is going to be the big trend in 2025. And I will tell you that already in the last month and a half or two, I've already had 4 requests for need some training, what's out there, what's available. I kind of give them some options, even options that don't include HR answers. You could explore this organization, you could do this, you might look at that. Here's a couple of links. And depending on what you're looking for, and really a good portion, all of them, where it's a person. And it's like, well, you can enroll them in our supervisory series that's coming up in March. That's in March. It's January. So timing often is an issue or concern, but also it's one person. It's not, we've got 30 some odd employees, Michelle, and they're all supervisors, and we'd like to have it for all of our people. So personalizing something that is, how about 3 sessions, one-on-one with you, Deborah, tackling these things because that's going to help them. And as long as I've got somebody on the inside of the organization who's also talking to them and helping to hold them accountable and talking to them so that we're kind of working together, because I'm not working with them day to day. I don't know what actually is occurring. I can ask the employee. I'm only getting one side of the equation. But that personalization is a big word for 2025. More personalized benefits and more personalized training. And that even shows up on this next slide in terms of what trends do you see? Social, micro learning, social learning, cohorts. So small groupings of people so that they can also network, they can learn together, they can problem solve together. And then the next group of enrollees. Also, then what do we learn from the first group? What do we need to tweak for the next group to enhance or better the training? What's their feedback to us? Gamification still is working with folks in some fashion or another, earning those stars or whatever makes sense for folks. And again, whether we're upskilling or reskilling, CEOs are saying time and time again that upskilling and reskilling our folks is going to be a big deal in terms of retention of individuals with the knowledge and skill base that they have. So being able to learn new stuff, enhance what they already know is a big deal. So by personalizing, we're tailoring the entire learning experience to fit the need of the employee. Self-pace. There's a bank that I'm familiar with that, and banks are notorious for, hey, you've been here 2 years, you're now eligible to enroll in or start taking this training. Now you've worked here 5 years, you can now enroll in this kind of programming or this kind of training. So you had to kind of put in your time. Well, this friend of mine who is the HR person, she said, you know what? I've been here for a long time. We've been doing this for a long time. I have a thought. What if we said, I wanted to get rid of all of that and we say this is available to people who've been with us for X amount of time. So they've actually like been with the organization, not for 2 weeks or 2 months, but you've actually been with us. You've demonstrated that you want to be here. You're interested in, and it's all self-paced. You're more driven, you're more motivated, then go for it. And that tells us who really wants to be here and grow within the organization, taking this learning, applying the learning. And those are the people that are going to get promoted because those are the ones that are showing us that they care, it matters, and that they're using the tools that we're giving them. And quite frankly, uh, I don't know how they pronounce their name. Dosibo. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. 58% of employees more likely to engage with personalized learning content that is broken down into smaller units. Takes more time, segment by segment by segment. So the question earlier about how do we deliver smaller segments, so more digestible, make it sticky, and then they're able to remember it better instead of 4 hours, dump it all on you. And the answer is can't walk away, can't use it all. Smaller segments are better. Questions or observations on that?
I wanted to say, we're working on a bit of training with you, Deborah, and it's kind of a couple of all of those things. We have one person who's being promoted or is promoted now this January into a management role. There's no issues with her. She's a wonderful human, but she's never managed. And so we're taking the opportunity, but we're doing one in person because I personally believe this type of training is better in person. And we're doing 3 shorter sessions, and we're having also a cohort, if you will, because she's going to go, her next management level is going to go because she said, I never had training really, so that's good. I'm going to come because, well, what the heck, I like to learn. So I think we're implementing a lot of all of what you're saying there.
And it's interesting that you say that, Cindy, because I cannot tell you the number of people who have participated in any kind of supervisory training that I've ever done, and they say, I've never had any formal training.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I've got a slide in here for all of you. If you have any kind of lead, supervisor, manager, leadership, training element at all on your table for 2025, awesome, kudos, do it, go for it, wish you well. If you don't, may I strongly encourage you that you put something together. Brown bag lunch during the supervisor manager weekly, monthly meetings. Please ask and carve out, even if it's 15 minutes, pick a topic, make it short and sweet. What challenges are you finding in terms of questions that those individuals are coming to you about, or you're seeing patterns or behavior of something that needs to be addressed, whatever it is. We don't come out of the womb knowing how to be managers and supervisors. We don't come into the workplace knowing how to do that. We get promoted oftentimes because we are the longest time person in the department, seniority. We show a lot of initiative. We do things really well. We are tactically, technically competent beyond belief, but we don't necessarily have people skills. If people don't have people skills and they aren't people, I very much worry about them being good supervisors. We've got to help them be successful in those jobs because otherwise we promote them, we wish them well, and we often walk away and they are not successful. And then we end up with challenges. And any of you who are the HR people, guess where you're spending your time? Please, 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 manager, supervisor training. I'll get off my soapbox. So I've given you a couple of slides in here that you can reference at your own because I want to also be thoughtful about our time. Again, I told you, I did alert you. More content, more slides than I shoulda, oughta. Uh, what's the difference between some job rotation opportunities or job enlargement or job enrichment? What does that look like in terms of making sure people aren't bored and retaining them or adding more tasks to their already existing list versus again, blended learning. And there really is a little bit of a misconception that, audio, visual, kinetic, all that stuff. Yes and no. Yes, there are different learning styles. Yes, we need to be thoughtful about that. However, if you can offer the same content and we're using those different styles and we're doing it over and over again, there was a program that I was part of back in early December. If you're having monthly meetings and you have a mission statement and you have a plan for 2025, make sure your message is heard at every meeting. Make sure it's in there. Whatever it is. If you've got a commitment to safety, make sure it's there. If you are going for growth in 2025, make sure it's there. Message meeting, message meeting. Always make sure that whatever it is, it's there. Repetition helps get it connected because people, if you want people like on board, a sense of connection to the mission, the core values, you got to make sure that people are there. Just saying it once and people going, uh-huh, we got to see it, hear it, and have them live it. So you got to keep repeating that. I already referenced social learning. There's a little bit of information, peer learning and mentoring. There's also reverse mentoring where our younger people are mentoring our more experienced individuals based on their knowledge and information. So it's not a top down scenario only. It can be a quote bottom up. How about that as a concept? You can Google that and learn a whole lot more. And how might it apply to your workplace? Let alone management training. There's my little graphic for you. Are you doing it? Could you? Should you? Yes. All right. Um, and whether or not, oh, I think maybe I put that in there twice because once wasn't enough. Oh, Deborah, poor editing. Shame on me. So there's all kinds, as you know, all kinds of benefits to employee training, right? The key really is developing skills and abilities. And when I talk with, oftentimes when I get a chance to talk with managers and supervisors, there's coaching conversations and there's counseling conversations. Please do not confuse that with counseling and therapy and whatnot, because it isn't. Coaching conversations are about knowledge, skills, and abilities. Well, guess what? That's what training is about. Making sure people have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the jobs that they're in, that they're trying to grow in, that we are as managers, supervisors, HR, hoping to retain employees, grow employees, develop employees. Because the answer is we can do a lot by offering options and opportunities. They have to want them or want to participate, right? But if they don't want to, that also sends us a message. Now, maybe we need some steady eddies inside our organization. Employee training and development needs to be on the table and it's not on the chopping block. but being able to not talk about developing skills and abilities. And if there's things that are getting in your way of being successful in the job, and it's not about knowledge, skills, and abilities, those are counseling conversations. What else is getting in your way? Because you got the knowledge, skills, and abilities. What else is getting in your way? And those might be some of the softer skill kinds of things. So employee motivation is a big deal, but we also have to have managers and supervisors that support, and they're motivated not only for their own development, but for investing in their employees and coming to you with ideas and suggestions as well. Now, one last thing, well, maybe two last things. There is a 6 strategies for better engaging learning that's happening next week on the 14th. Here's a link. Now, this you might want to take a picture of because you'll have that faster than when this gets out to you. And there is a resource called the Training Magazine that I actually subscribe to. It's free. There's all kinds of complimentary programming for yourself, maybe for staff, and I would encourage you to receive those. Now, they're good about sending out emails, but I participate in these in a good number of them when I'm not otherwise engaged with clients. I think they could be good resources for you if training is at all your thing. So, my last question, and then open it up for any questions. Anything you're going to start working on? Anything here you're going to share with others? Then I encourage you to do so. So, questions that you have, information that you would also share with the group, now's a good time to do so. What have you got for me? What else might make sense in terms of information on today's topic? Good. I'm glad, Michelle, that this has been good for you, been helpful. Some things to help think about. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands. Nobody's unmuting. Curious what everyone is calling their teams, departments that support these programs. Good. That's a great question. So like a training department, leadership, someone says we are training and development. Okay. Sometimes it might just be under the umbrella of HR, depending on how large the department is, or if they have someone dedicated. What about the rest of you? Do you have it? Sometimes depending on the topics, you might have a safety manager and certain topics are falling under them. Some people have a compliance manager and certain topics would fall under them. Someone says it's the learning and development team. Another person says learning and development manager, which is under HR, which we've renamed as our people and culture department. Okay, there we go. Like it. Good question. Other questions? All right. Well, you can see on the side that on the slide that we've got a couple of topics that are headed our direction coming up on February 5th. 3 pillars of wellness culture. I'm actually going to have a guest. Her name is Danielle. Join us for that conversation. And then on March 5th, we'll have demystifying pay transparency. While it is not a requirement in the state of Oregon for pay transparency, our neighbors to the north in the state of Washington sometimes are clientele and some of our visitors right here today are in the state of Washington. They are required to do that. And I think it's just a matter of time before it hits Oregon. But there's benefits to sharing that information. In fact, I actually saw a blog post. Maybe it wasn't a blog post, it might have just been people responding in a blog post or a little video. Maybe it was a video. You get to be my age. And the answer is like, I remember seeing something, but I can't remember exactly where I saw it or how I saw it. It was a video and it was an exchange. If I were to ask about salary and the interviewer said, we would tell you we are competitive. And he said, and competitive means what? And the response back was something about um, the going market in our area. And then the applicant said, and that means what? And then he got a ding on his cell phone and it says, there's a job offer and here's the pay range. And he goes, finally, an answer. Because the pay range was listed in. I'm thinking, that's there's pay transparency when we have something there, because when it's nebulous, a good portion of our applicants are looking for more. So we'll be talking about that on Wednesday. In March. All right, sometimes words are difficult. So for all of you who were part of this one, thank you so very much for being here. I'm glad that you were. I appreciate your participation. And if we can ever help, let us know. Otherwise, hope that you will join us at another HR Lunch Bunch in the future. I'll stick around. I'm always the last one here if you want to chat a little bit afterwards. Otherwise, we'll call that an official put this one in the box, as it were. And thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.